There's probably 5 key things around cinematography that I wish I'd learned sooner. Not being a videographer, shooting like a videographer is very different to shooting like a cinematographer. So 2 years ago I was really struggling, felt like I'd hit a plateau in filmmaking. I didn't know what to shoot when I arrived at a location. And I realized it's because I was being a videographer and not a cinematographer. We need to maximize what we're shooting to get the most out of your shots. Owning a good camera just doesn't mean you're a cinematographer, and what is required. I feel like cinematographer is someone who can walk into a room and be like, okay, we need to shoot from this angle with this lighting because this is where the lighting's coming. We need this focal length. The subjects are going to be placed here. The best way to capture the shot is going to be from this angle. The second shot's going to be from this other direction because we want to tell a story like this. Using the space to get the most out of it. Knowing how to frame up the image perfectly. Where the videographer, I don't know how, I kind of see it as someone you just pass them the camera and they know how to press record and they know how to operate the camera. Where the cinematographer is, they have more creative direction, more emphasis on what is trying to be told in the frame, maximizing that frame to get the most out of that frame. So here's the 5 key things to level up and become more of a cinematographer than videographer, and what let me improve my videos way more. So 24 frames, depth of field, shallow depth of field, dynamic shots, good camera movement, better composition, handheld and gimbal, and used at the right time and not just always using a gimbal or always going handheld. So the camera movement's got to be motivated. Lighting, so that's a deep one to go into about backlighting and the right amount of lighting and dim lighting and where to put your skin tones. And then color grading. So I see a lot of people use way too much contrast. So you shoot it very flat and you add minimal contrast into the image, or you pull out a bit of contrast. I see people use way too much contrast, and I do have a color grading course that I go over that as well. Certain things you need to look out for if you're trying to get a cinematic color grade, or the color grade I go for. So how I stopped shooting like a videographer and shot more like a cinematographer, and what made it possible to arrive at a location and then create the videos I wanted was to download a shot list of every single movie I've watched in the last 3 years. So I recorded every little sequence, everything that was recreatable within a movie, that was within my budget or within my skill set or within what I could get to use for filmmaking. So now everywhere I go, I have a shot list, a video shot list. Still images are way too limiting. If we are cinematographers, we need the shot list in video so you can see how the sequence plays out, the angles, camera movement, subject movement, and then how the lighting is affecting or how subjects are interacting with objects, and the pacing of the video as well. Just stuff you don't get, even the audio. That you don't get with still images. So that's what really let me level up my filmmaking, was really concentrating, not watching content creators, but watching movies, recording them. Because if you just reference still frames, your shots, a lot like when I started 4 years ago or something, my travel videos would just be maybe the slightest push in, and like there's just not much happening in terms of camera movement, subjects coming in and out of frame, or just advanced things movies do. And that's probably my only regret, is not watching movies more to learn from. Rather, I was learning from like my favorite content creators, where movies have an unlimited amount of knowledge you can learn from, and you're more likely to discover your own style. If you are watching movies, you'll gravitate in a million different ways you can go. Okay, so shoot at 24 frames, so stop shooting at 120. So 120 in and of itself, it's not really storytelling, it's more B-roll. If you want to do cinematography, make it feel more like a movie, then 24 frames is what you're gonna really want. Okay, so the final thing that really elevated was sequencing and structuring, or story. If you have a story, then your video naturally has good structure to it because the story plays out. And without a story, it's very hard to have a well-composed series of sequences, and if you just have good sequences, can really tie in your videos. And also just knowing how to introduce a scene, exit a scene, can give a lot of structure to your video. Another thing I needed to stop doing was shooting so shallow, although it gives like a really cinematic look. A lot of my shots were far too shallow, so use an appropriate amount of f-stop. So I find f2 is in no higher than f4 is like the sweet spot for me. So using the right amount of gimbal versus handheld, and knowing when to use handheld versus gimbal. So you want to use gimbal for maybe smooth intro shots, and then you want to go handheld for more raw, feeling close to the camera shot. I'm leaning more to no gimbal nowadays because everything is a little too polished. So handheld and gimbal at the right time, and choosing the right one for the right scenario. And then the next one would be knowledge of lighting. So I went deep on lighting for like a few months, just watched every video there was on lighting and everything I could. So what this does will teach you a lot about depth really. You're just trying to create the most depth in your image with cinematic lightings, but you're really just trying to create lots of depth to make the subject really stand out. Probably the final and most important thing I did was I started referencing movies to learn. So I stopped watching social media content because that's really not cinematography all the time. So I started to only learn from movies. I wanted my videos to look like movies, so that's the only thing I started to reference when I was trying to learn. What I have started to notice over the last year or so is storytelling really is the next level to cinematography. So you can be a great cinematographer and not be a storyteller, but however, I find the shots, the angles you find come from the story you're trying to tell. So if you have a good story, it becomes much easier to get these cinematic shots because the shots have purpose. There's an unlimited amount of shots you could choose from, which makes it really hard when doing a travel video. So a story narrows it down and makes it much, much easier.